The world is divided into four spheres, each sphere divided among continents and nations. Nations are divided by borders and interests. These interests divide the news. We examine the impact of these divisions on people and power. This is Imaginary Lines.
Welcome to the program. I'm your host, Michael Fox. On May 1st, people around the world celebrated International Workers' Day. The holiday is officially recognized in more than 60 countries, but in the United States and Canada, it's largely unknown. I'll speak with Stephen Thornton, retired Vice President of the Service Employees International Union District 1199, about the history of May Day and what it means today. But first, a look at media in Latin America. In mid-April, the government of President Manuel Santos in Colombia announced that in response to a clash between FARC guerrillas and government troops, he would be lifting the suspension of bombing campaigns against the FARC. The move marks a setback in the nation's two-year peace process and a victory of sorts for conservative factions inside Colombia who have attempted to halt the peace dialogue. The FARC has strongly denied that they instigated the April violence, as the rebels have been abiding by a unilateral ceasefire. Mainstream media outlets, however, have parroted the official line of the Colombian military, which claims that government forces were ambushed by the guerrillas. The social organization Broad Front for Peace traveled to the region where the clash occurred and found that much of the story put out by the army didn't match the versions of the events told by the residents of the area. Nevertheless, headlines throughout the world insist on blaming the FARC for the deaths. The U.S. State Department also joined in the media campaign, condemning what they called a brutal attack by the guerrillas. For the first time in 50 years, peace in Colombia is a real possibility. Journalists covering the country owe it to the families of the victims of the conflict to accurately report events in Colombia, lest this opportunity to end the bloodshed be lost. International Workers' Day, otherwise known as May Day, is celebrated on May 1st around the world. The date is an opportunity for workers to celebrate their triumphs over centuries of struggle and to draw attention to the plight of contemporary workers internationally. Despite the fact that the commemoration actually stems from labor organizing in the United States, most North Americans don't celebrate the date. Stephen Thornton is the retired Vice President of District 1199 of the labor union SEIU in the state of Connecticut. He's been a tenant organizer and has served on the National Steering Committee of U.S. Labor Against the War. Hi, Stephen. Welcome to Imaginary Lines.
Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
First, can you provide some historical context to International Workers' Day and tell us a little bit about its origins?
Well, remember that in the United States, workers used to have to labor 10, 12, 15 hours a day, maybe 6 days a week, in order to bring home a paycheck. And that was an impossible task. So that was the beginning of the campaign for the 8-hour day. The way that Chicago unions expressed that was they set a deadline. May 1st, 1886 would be the day by which all employers would start paying their employees for 8 hours of work with no cut in pay. And that was the genesis of the first May Day in the United States and really the first around the world.
The date also comes from the Chicago Haymarket protests the same year. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
In 1886, just around May 1st, there was a strike at McCormick Harvester in Chicago. It was a terrible, bloody strike, and the police violence on the line, on the picket line, was awful. At one particular point in time, supporters of the union from around the city decided to have a big support rally in Haymarket Square, Chicago's Haymarket Square. Speakers got up and they expressed their support, and the rally was really dispersing when all of a sudden someone threw a bomb into the crowd. And that bomb killed a number of people, a number of policemen. The police opened fire indiscriminately and killed a number of workers. And they had to blame it on somebody, so they rounded up anarchists, and they said these are the most likely culprits. It was never proven who did it, but they hanged for it. And the Haymarket martyrs and May Day have been linked ever since.
In the United States, Labor Day is celebrated in September, but why is International Workers' Day still important in the U.S. and Canada?
Well, I'm happy to have two workers' holidays. I like Labor Day. I like May Day. Labor Day has been commercialized and sanitized, and it's largely lost its meaning. And that's partially workers' fault, but it's mostly the fault of people who would rather drain a workers' holiday of all its blood and of all its meaning. May Day, on the other hand, is absolutely clear. There's no mistaking that if you go and parade on May Day, you're parading on behalf of workers' rights, all workers' rights everywhere, and that this is not an employee-employer relationship or a picnic. It's a workers' holiday.
In the U.S., International Workers' Day has become prominent over the last decade or so, particularly within the immigrant rights movement. Can you speak to this?
Sure. We really owe a debt, and when I say we, I mean the U.S. labor movement, owe a debt to the immigrants who came out by the millions in 2006. The enormous immigrant rights demonstrations around the country happened on May 1st, 2006. Again, that was not an accident. Workers in all other countries celebrate May 1st. But by doing it on that day, U.S. labor folks actually looked at each other and said, hey, that's right, we should be out there celebrating with them and struggling with them. Of course, many workers were, and that sort of helped bring back May 1st, May Day, to the American labor movement.
This year, May Day came just over 2 weeks after low-wage workers launched major actions in over 200 cities around the country. They demanded a $15 an hour minimum wage, and they're calling this nationwide campaign the Fight for 15. What's the importance of this growing campaign around the country?
There really is a parallel between the original fight for the 8-hour day and today's fight for a $15 minimum wage and a union, because it's the workers who are poorest and, in a sense, in the least secure positions who are at the front of the struggle. And just like the 8-hour day had real resonance with working people back then, so the $15 an hour minimum wage really speaks to them. Now, in both cases, then and now, we have skeptics who say, oh no, 8 hours a day is too extravagant, $15 an hour minimum wage is too extravagant, you'll never achieve it. And we have bosses who say, no, it'll put us out of business. In both cases, they've always used the same excuses. But I think workers understand that this is an achievable goal, and that just as workers have fought in the past, they can win their fight too.
Thank you, Stephen, for joining me on Imaginary Lines.
Thanks. I really appreciate being able to talk to you.
Upon announcing that she will seek the nomination for the Democratic Party in the upcoming U.S. presidential elections, Hillary Clinton has taken a decidedly progressive stance on many issues. Her rhetoric has moved so sharply to the left that she is drawing comparisons to U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren, the darling of liberals within the Democratic Party. The New York Times ran an article on April 21st entitled, "Campaign Casts Hillary Clinton as the populist it insists she's always been." Rolling Stone magazine ran a particularly scathing critique of the Clinton strategy. Clinton's progressive credentials are highly suspect, and her willingness to raise class issues must be seen as an indication of the growing clamor for justice among the U.S. working class. Workers insist that issues affecting them, such as inequality, cuts to social programs, and unemployment, be debated in this election, and that the answers to these problems cannot be written off as simply electoral populism. Just as May Day has been ignored by the establishment in North America, to mention the word class in the United States has been taboo for far too long. Perhaps it will be the coming presidential election that working class demands are forced back on the agenda of national politics. That's it for today's program. Thanks for watching the show. I'm your host, Michael Fox. Please Please join me next week.